15th, 1966. Two young couples were driving down a dark road outside of town. As they passed by an old building, they were startled by a frightening sight.
They claimed to have seen a large winged creature, 6 to 7 foot tall, gray in color, and two large red eyes. They said this creature flew over their car and followed them back into town. That was the beginning of the Mothman sighting.
The young couple's harrowing account was picked up by...
Welcome to the Lair of the Unknown, my friends. I am your host, the Dark Lord. Today, we shall continue the discussion surrounding the mystery of the Mothman. The strange events in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, surrounding the winged, red-eyed entity, made many question whether the Mothman was an angel from heaven, trying to warn them of coming doom, or a demon coming forth from hell itself, purposely causing disasters. This seemed to be bringing up more questions than it did answers. Many West Virginia residents also made direct connections with their cattle mutilations with the Mothman, believing there was no other connections to make it with, except UFOs. Many common household pets, such as dogs and cats, not only acted strangely during the times of the Mothman sightings, but many reported their dogs, cats, and cattle disappearing, which many blamed the Mothman for causing. Cattle mutilations were also becoming a problem among farmers and landowners. Farmers would find their cattle with many of their organs removed and the animal's carcass drained completely of blood and bodily functions. However, most people connected these animals with UFO abduction, but I will talk about that in another discussion. Now, many Mothman eyewitnesses also claimed that they received strange phone calls from unknown sources, and that they heard beeping noises, a stranger talking quickly in a foreign language, and other strange noises. These problems would become such a severe problem that they would go from having the phone line checked to even changing their number. Neither one of these methods would even work, as the calls would start again without even having the chance to give their new phone number to anybody else. Many tried to convince themselves that these phone calls were just coming from a hoax source. However, it seemed pretty clear that all these calls were not hoaxers, seeing as it would be far too difficult for all these phone calls to be from hoaxers. Many of the calls would be identified as electrical impulses, which pretty much means it does not even exist. So whatever the source is coming from was not from human vocal cords. The biggest question that I, the Dark Lord, have is that of all cities and towns, and not only America, but also the entire world itself, why was it only Point Pleasant, West Virginia that the Mothman was sighted, despite reports that some have claimed to have seen it elsewhere? Point Pleasant remains the most famous home of the Mothman to this day. But seriously, why was it only Point Pleasant? I mean, that is such a random choice for a mysterious creature to be sighted, especially one that is this terrifying. Is it maybe because the Mothman is nothing other than a failed or even successful World War II experiment? I mean, the first place it was sighted in was an old World War II TNT ammunitions plant. It was a hazardous waste site where they stored weapons, powders, and explosives during the war. But after the war, it was left abandoned, where gases and other waste products mutated out of control. Yet it still remains in the same spot to this very day. As I have said before, during 1967, when Point Pleasant was a hotspot for Mothman sightings, several states southwest of Point Pleasant in the thick wilderness of Bluff Creek, California, Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson had their famous encounter with a female Bigfoot, now officially known as Patty. However, it only lasted for no more than a minute and a half. After their footage was released, Bigfoot became the most elusive creature of cryptozoology as California, Oregon, and Washington state forests became hotspots for Sasquatch sightings. Now back to the Mothman. Local townspeople and cops went on many searches through the wilderness areas of Point Pleasant hoping to hunt down the Mothman. None of which were successful, though, as the only way you'll see the Mothman is when he reveals himself to you, same as Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. However, some would not even want to see the Mothman, as the experience would traumatize them the rest of their lives. That's how scary it would. Now, there have been claims by people that the Mothman was seen flying over around the Chernobyl plant in Ukraine right before the 1986 disaster. However, I believe that to be false, just like the claim that the Mothman was seen lurking around the Twin Towers before 9/11 occurred. My question is, if it was seriously not sighted, why was it not sighted? Why was it only seen for one period of time in one town? That's one thing I just cannot seem to answer for the life of me. Now, what about the eyewitnesses of Mothman being visited by the Men in Black? Oh, and by the way, it wasn't just Mothman eyewitnesses claiming to have been visited by the Men in Black. It was the eyewitnesses of any supernatural occurrence being visited by the MIB, including witnesses of UFOs, ghosts, and of course, other cryptids. Now, there are many theories as to who the Men in Black really were, or even who they worked for. Many believe they were actually aliens in disguise working for top secret government agencies. After the mysterious men would leave the witnesses' homes, the witnesses would be sometimes too frightened to even speak to others about what the encounter they had just experienced. Actually, during one of the encounters, the Men in Black did an interesting card trick in front of the witnesses, which actually impressed them a bit, until the man said, "If you want to keep living, drop the case you are investigating, or else the same thing will happen to you." After this incident occurred, the witness dropped the case immediately and did everything we're told without question. Another question I have is, which would be a scarier encounter, seeing the Mothman or seeing a UFO? Of course, to me they are both terrifying encounters, seeing as I have experienced nightmares about both of them. The nightmares I've experienced about UFOs are more about being abducted by them rather than just seeing them. Then again, laying in bed and seeing a pair of red eyes outside my window just staring at me would be absolutely terrifying as well. If you've ever been to Point Pleasant, you realize that despite the fact that Mothman hasn't been seen since 1967, it still grows to be a major legend as the years go by. Now that's when you know there's something big to the Mothman. Now these events obviously attracted the attention of author John Keel, who, after hearing about these incidents, came to Point Pleasant and began investigating Mothman and other paranormal encounters. These investigations eventually inspired him to write the book, The Mothman Prophecies, which gave detailed accounts of what eyewitnesses encountered and such. This book, of course, inspired Hollywood to make the film The Mothman Prophecies, starring Richard Gere, but I will discuss that later. In 2003, Bob Roach, an artist and sculptor, built a 12-foot-tall metal statue with beady red eyes to represent the official legend of the Mothman and when it was first sighted, and the impact it made on the town of Point Pleasant. This became so popular that a man proposed marriage to his girlfriend in front of the Mothman statue. Now, as I have said before, many skeptics claim that the so-called Mothman is just a misidentified animal, such as a sandhill crane. Some skeptics go as far as joking about the Mothman by painting a large, fake bird on thin wood and comparing it to eyewitness description accounts of different Mothman illustrations. Obviously, when hoaxers try to discredit eyewitnesses by claiming that they saw something unusual, they attempt to deny the serious work of investigators and cryptozoologists. A sandhill crane seems very unlikely, by the way, seeing as they may stand tall and have red feathers around their eyes, but they don't fly at speeds of 100 miles per hour, and they flap their wings more often than the so-called moth. On July 11th, 2001, which is ironic seeing as my 6th birthday was the day after, Donnie Sargent Jr., an investigator of the Mothman, conducted an exclusive interview with the first eyewitness of the Mothman named Linda Scarberry, who I have mentioned before. Here is what she had to say. Linda began in the interview stating that no one in the car had used alcohol or drugs of any kind when they were sitting in the car around 11:30 p.m. on a very clear and cold night in November of '66. Linda spotted a pair of red eyes attached to a 7-foot-tall winged humanoid. Immediately, Linda pointed the creature out to the others, who became rigid with fear. However, the creature seemed to be more terrified of them than they did with it. However, they fled the scene out of terror, but after they left, they were more inclined to find out more about the creature, but were hesitant to do so out of fear. When they went to the police half an hour later, who were skeptical about their current story and thought they were nuts, however, after seeing their terrified expressions, they began to become less skeptical. Linda claimed that she had seen the Mothman many more times after her initial sighting, as did 30 to 40 other people, who have claimed to have seen the same thing. Linda did not think that the Mothman had anything to do with satanic rituals, UFOs, the Men in Black, or the destruction of the Silver Bridge, believing that there were conspiracies surrounding those incidents, and also believed that the Mothman was nothing but a twisted distraction from other problems concerning the town. Linda confessed that there were other things she was not revealing about during this interview, and Donnie respected that. She also opened up that she and her friends and now ex-husband were haunted by this experience the rest of her life and their lives as well. Well, this was quite an interesting interview. Linda Scarberry passed away in March of 2011 and maintained right up to her final days that her Mothman experience was not a prank or hoax, and it haunted her for the rest of her life. Now let me say this. Linda Scarberry and her friends may have had their legendary encounter with the mysterious red-eyed beast, but they were not the only ones that encountered it. Over 150 residents of Point Pleasant encountered the Mothman. That includes mysterious phone calls, the MIB, and people seeing a flying man a dozen times over the TNT plants. Women also report seeing a moth-like flying man over the Johnny Appleseed Park near Point Pleasant, which nearly collided with their car. Now let's say this. You may want to believe that what these people saw was a misidentified animal, but when over 150 people coming forth saying they all saw the same thing numerous times during the course of a year and a half, over 7 foot tall, 8 foot long wingspan, huge red eyes, and silvery gray in color. To me that sounds nothing like a sandhill crane, so it's gotta be something else. Join me next time, my friends, when I epically conclude the discussion surrounding the mystery surrounding the Mothman. Ciao, bitches!